Greetings, people who really like grammar, or pretend to really like grammar, to gain favor from those who really like grammar. As you might recall, I developed, or you might say invented, a thing called amplified verb tense. I took the concept of verb tense and tried to make it better, tried to refine it, and so now we're on our second video. And in this second video, I'd like to talk about the simple tense, specifically the simple present tense, and talk about the helping verbs or auxiliary verbs have, had, be, and been. Okay? I mentioned in a previous video that I had some goals, and one was to discuss the verb base form, specifically the simple present tense, right? And to define the helping verbs, be, been, have, had, and to talk about tense realization, how we get to the sense of tense in a sentence. I want to talk about how we form the perfect progressive tense. Then I wanted to talk about the new names and perspective that I bring to this grammar concept. Okay. Now, regarding the verb base form, the verb base form, excuse me, is used in the simple present tense. Okay. Now, in my system, which we'll talk about later, I call the simple present tense the basic current tense. We'll talk about that later. So let me give you an example sentence. I work at Lowe's. Okay? And in that sentence, the verb work is in its base form. Okay? Now what that does is when you make a sentence like that with the verb base form, or using the verb in the simple present tense, what you're doing is you're making a declaration of performance or involvement in an activity. Or you could say, I engage or participate in the act denoted by the verb, or you could say, I perform or carry out the act denoted by the verb. Okay, that sounds a little goofy, but let's look at the actual verb base form. That verb base form is used in the simple present tense. Now, I call it an open tense. I call it an open tense because I want to show you here how the verb base form is used in many different applications. All right? And then you'll end up asking yourself, as I did, is this really a categorical tense? Is this really specifically a tense that makes sense? Okay? So now, the verb base form is used for many different applications. All right? So I'm going to mention 8 of those applications. So let's go over that. The verb base form is used to express habitual or recurring actions. A sample sentence would be, I work at Lowe's. Okay, that's a sample. I work, verb base form. Or, we close the bakery at 6 p.m. That's how people talk. We close the bakery at 6 p.m. And that's how they talk. It's used to denote habitual or recurring actions. But the question is it really present tense? In other words, present at the moment tense. I work at Lowe's. I'm saying that using the verb base form, but am I actually presently working at Lowe's? No, I'm sitting at home in my office saying this. So you see how that's a little bit vague? Okay, the second application would be events. To describe events in a literary work, it's used in expressing events in a literary work, or to discuss the contents of a literary work. That's when the verb base form is used. An example would be, okay, Superman always saves Lois. Saves. verb base form or simple present tense. Or you could say, Hamlet contemplates suicide. Okay, those are two examples. But is it really the present in the moment tense? Not really. You're talking about a literary work that's already been written, it's already been understood, and it's not really happening now. Okay? Then the third application would be quoting, summarizing, or paraphrasing the author of a non-literary work. An example would be in this sentence. In the article, the author examines several possible causes of cancer. Okay, examines is your verb base form. All right. And another sentence would be, in his fireside chat, the Prime Minister states his goals. And your simple present tense or your verb base form would be states. And here again, it's not really categorically, absolutely present in the moment tense. And you have application number 4. It's used to reveal general truths or facts. Okay, for example, the verb indicates kind of a continuous state. You could say the sky is blue. All right, misery loves company, or crime doesn't pay. You have the verbs are all in base form. All right, and they are used here in what would traditionally be called the simple present tense. But is it really the present in the moment tense or sense? Not really. Commands, use it in commands. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Speak, hold, verb base form. Or mind your manners. Mind. Give me a break. Give is the verb base form. And you could say it's in the present tense because it's a time of speech thing. It's happening at the time of speech, but other than that, it's still a little vague. Okay, this application number 6 would be it's used to indicate or anticipate future actions. Example sentences would be, Mary leaves tomorrow, or the plane lands in 1 hour, or the course begins tomorrow. In each of these examples, you're using the verb base form. But see, when you talk like that, when you say, well, Mary leaves tomorrow, that's kind of grammatically stupid and incorrect. You really should be saying, Mary will leave tomorrow. Okay? But in our minds, we do the elliptical thing. We abridge things. We shorten them. We make them quicker because, first of all, we save time and people know what we're talking about. So this application is kind of elliptical or abridged, or I might even call it lazy. Okay? The plane lands in 1 hour. It'll land an hour from now, but does it land every hour? Does it keep landing every hour? Now, another application for the verb base form would be fake news and mainstream media. This is very popular nowadays. Let's use an example of a fake news usage of the verb. At least 20 people die when a United airliner crashes. At least 20 people die when a United airliner crashes. You see, at least 20 people die, verb base form, simple present tense. They don't say 20 people died when the airliner crashed. They talk like this for some strange reason. It might be part of the dumbing down of America, or it might be, I don't know what it is, laziness. But the point is, aside from the fact that most of the news we hear is fake, it's not teaching children to speak correctly and efficiently. Here's another sentence. You'll hear this on the news. They'll say, we're back in 5. We are verb base form, back in 5. So you hear this kind of talk all the time on fake news or what they might call the mainstream media. And then finally, there's the category of time of speech action. An example would be, I see you, or I hear you loud and clear, or yes, I understand it now. So you see you're using the verb base form in each sentence, each example. And that is actually truly a present in the moment tense when you use it for a time of speech action. In other words, you see me, I see you, and it's happening now. It's terribly in the present. It's really present. You can't be any more in the present, except, of course, for the fact that this is a video and it's already transpired. So anyway, so that's examples. That's 8 applications of how the verb base form is used in the simple present tense or in its basic raw form. Okay, this is hard to explain for a guy who never went to school. Anyway, now one of the goals in this series of videos was to actually explain, to define the so-called helping verbs be and been and have and had. Because when you go in the dictionary, okay, you'll find a so-called definition, but it's not really a definition. Let's say we have the words be and been, all right? Here's samples. I will be working, or I have been working, okay? Those are the words used in sample sentences. Now, they're kind of synthetic, not complete sentences, but I just want to show you the verb, okay? Now, I wanted to know the definitions of be, been, had, and have. And so for be and been, the dictionary says, this is a definition, used as the auxiliary of the present participle in progressive tenses expressing continuous action. That definition doesn't define, it just tells you what the function of the words be and been could be if used that way. It doesn't define it. So I want to define it. In the sample sentence, I will be working. Okay, be. Right? Be can be defined. I looked on the internet. There's 5 billion videos on YouTube. 5 billion every day. I cannot find a definition for these words. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. Be can mean to engage in the act of. Be could also be defined as affect the action of, or you could say it could be defined as perform the action of. Okay? Now, if that holds true, then you could say, I will engage in the action of working. You understand? I will engage in the act of working. And that definition works. Maybe not always, but ordinarily. Now, for the word been, B-E-E-N, you could define it as meaning engaged in the act of, or affected in the act of, or performed the act of. Now you see a big difference here. This is very important. Nobody talks about it. Nobody. In the case of be, you see that the in the definition, the verb is in your simple present tense, or what I would call in my system the basic current, right? That's my new thing. And then the verb been is used, you see this clearly, in the simple past tense, or what I would call the basic past tense in my new system, which I'll get to soon. So you see, you can now define the verbs be and been in this application, which is beautiful. No one's done it. And it works. And you can see clearly that for the verb be, it's used in your definition. The verbs in your definition are in the simple present tense. And you see for been, the word been, the verbs in the definition are all in your simple past tense. There's a distinction there that I made that I don't think anybody else has ever made. Now, to make it even better, when I invented my music systems, I invented or developed, whatever word you want to use, what I call the amplified circle of fifths. I really worked hard and long on this. And in that system, I developed or invented what I call the aggregating minor. Remember, in the traditional system, you have your tonal center and you have your relative minor. See, relative minor? Well, I invented the aggregating minor. That's on the other side. That's on the other opposing slice on your amplified circle of fifths. So I took that concept of the aggregating part or the aggregating component and just transferred it over to grammar. So I now refer to be and been as your aggregating auxiliaries. In other words, they're still helping verbs, but I call them aggregating auxiliaries. So now they're defined and they're a real thing. They're tangible. It's like, oh, we're discovering their place. And in our minds, we're discovering how they ended up there. How did they get there? After thousands of years of people speaking in a certain language, how did they get there? And what are they? Well, I'm telling you what they are for the first time probably in the history of human stupidity. Now, let's look at, hold on a second. Oh, hold on. Okay, the other two auxiliary verbs or helping verbs or helping words are have and had. Okay, have and had. Now, up to now, if you look in the dictionary, in this grammatical application, it doesn't define them. They're not defined. So I thought, well, while I'm at it, I might as well go ahead and do that too. So, have and had, I define have and had as words that affirm. They assert positively. In other words, have and had actually will mean in this application, in fact or indeed. In other words, in fact or indeed. So we're starting to give them some form of definition for the first time in English history, okay? And just like with the other ones, to find the place and establish the place, I've called these affirming auxiliaries. These are the affirming auxiliaries. They make an affirmation plainly and clearly. These are the aggregating auxiliaries because without these, an aggregate, you won't have a whole thing. To make it whole and complete, you need these. You can't say, I will working, or I will have working. You can't do it. You gotta have be and been. So for have and had, okay, affirming auxiliaries, you look at it and you say, well, does it work? Is this definition gonna work? Or does the definition need some refinement? Well, here's a sample sentence. I have worked here on 3 separate occasions. I have worked here on 3 separate occasions. So, added to your definition of in fact or indeed, you now see that the word have is representing something which means at some point before the present moment. It's an affirming auxiliary denoting an action happening at some point before the present moment. So if you do a little timeline thing here, and this is the present moment, you'll see you have these 3 points that happened before the present moment. Okay? I have worked here on 3 separate occasions. 3 separate occasions, and here's the present moment. They came before that present moment. Okay, quickly, I'm going as fast as I can. Next word, had. I had worked there until I retired. So now we know had means in fact or indeed, but it means a bit more. It's also telling you that something happened from some point prior to a later point, which came before the present moment. So I had worked there until I retired. I can't see this. I had worked there until I retired. And here's your present moment, the moment of speech. So you see this? I had worked there, and then this point until I retired. And all comes before the moment of speech. All right, so now you have a clear definition of have and had. So let's combine them with the words be and been. All right, let's use been. I have been working here for 3 years. All right, so have been tells us that it's from some point prior to the present to the present. I have been working here. I have been working here for 3 years. Now, when you say have been, that brings us up to the moment of speech, the present moment. You see how the timeline's different? Each one is different, and that's why you need the words be and been. Critical. Okay, finally, I had been working full-time when I had the accident. I had been. So had still means, in fact, indeed, but it's extended, and it can mean from some point prior to a later point which came before the present moment. And that's just like the original standalone word had. So you say, I had been working full-time when I had the accident. So I had been working full-time when I had, you see had in red, had the accident. And then all came before the present moment. In other words, the moment that you're speaking. So in a nutshell, I apologize for taking too long, but we looked at the so-called simple present tense, which I call basic current. We'll talk about it later. I showed how it's used in 8 different applications, and rarely does it appear truly in the simple present tense. And we defined be and been, have and had. We finally defined it after 2,000 years. So now that that's established, we'll move forward in the next video. I know that took forever, but this is complicated. It's probably my last grammar series. And just like with my music ideas, it might have to happen after I'm dead, but I think my music ideas, these, and my grammar ideas will eventually stick and be embraced. I really do, because they're pretty damn good. Anyway, thanks for being patient, and hope to see you soon.